Hi, my name is Adora and being such a bibliophile as I am, I wanted to talk about some of my favorite books. Now, this is by no means a comprehensive selection. Of course, we have, I think, thousands of books in our house, so I can only go so far to find which ones I like, but here's A Tale of Two Cities. It's an extremely old copy, this one, but I totally agree with what it says on the back, an unforgettable story, and that it's one of the most exciting novels of all time. More than being, however, a simply exciting novel, with many kind of action elements when you think about it, life and death on the line, it also has many elements that are sentimental and that really strike at deep human emotions. There's the issue of love and what love is, and sacrifice and its connection to that. And ultimately, there's a tremendous amount of sacrifice in this book. I feel like the last line of the story is really one of the best. It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known. And those are the words thought of by Sydney Carton, who's the person who makes the big sacrifice in the book. You can read it if you have not already to find out what that is. But of course, it's just a tremendously moving novel. I will warn you that you have to get through about this far, maybe even a little bit further before you literally get into the story. Charles Dickens requires a lot of patience. Being a serial writer, as he was writing and getting paid by the word, you can understand that he maybe had a bit of an incentive to be more convoluted than might have been necessary, but it's ultimately extremely well written, excellent narrative, well-built characters, and it's all against the historical, dramatic backdrop of the French Revolution. Who doesn't love liberté, égalité, fraternité? Going to a completely different type of setting, The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton really brings this insider's perspective on the glittering but ultimately soulless world of the moneyed class in New York and their social mores. It's an extremely long book. If you see, like, the font in here is tiny and it's still this thick. But it's really worth the read. I started reading and I got engrossed. Maybe because the main character of Lily Bart I felt very empathetic towards or relatable. But also because the setting is not all that different from today's world, not quite in the same dramatic sense, because ultimately the character is driven to do some pretty tremendously terrible things, but that there's still that element of we have all these social interactions, we do all these things, but where is the meaning, and where is the actual emotion behind all of it? So in this way, it's extremely similar to The Great Gatsby. The difference between The House of Mirth and The Great Gatsby, I feel, is that The House of Mirth puts a certain non-cynical value on love that The Great Gatsby almost treats with a sort of jaded air, maybe more appropriate for the modernist 1920s setting. So The House of Mirth, really depressing. You have to have a certain tolerance for downward spirals. Honestly, if you look at A Tale of Two Cities, The House of Mirth, Villette, all these stories that I like, unrequited love, woo. But it makes for extremely good storytelling. Now this, I guess I can't really call it my favorite book because, to tell the truth, it's a compilation. It's an anthology, the Norton Anthology of Poetry. It is the boss of poetry books. This is what I use for my AP Lit class. Now, would I be lying if I said I have read everything in this book? Yes, I would. I do not have patience for 1600s metaphysical English poets. Sorry, Andrew Marvell. But the point is that there are some amazing poems in here, and when you read such a wide compilation of poetry, you really get to understand the human experience on a depth of level that I feel like you can't if you only look at history. No offense, I love history. But the thing with poetry is that it evinces emotion and feeling and sentiment on such a level, as well as the kind of fleeting images, the ethos of a time period. So language arts and history, I feel, really complement each other tremendously. Now, as a perfect example of one of those poems that kind of evinces the ethos of a time, T.S. Eliot's Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock really represents that modernist fragmentation of experience. No longer are poems polite, sentimental, rhyming, strict form. You kind of start and you finish and you know where it went. These poems are confused. They can be violent, the images are jarring, unpleasant, and it doesn't make you feel good necessarily after reading it. If you read a pretty Wordsworth poem about being in a dandelion field, of course you're going to feel nice and fuzzy inside. Those are the romantic poets, and after the ravages of World War I, people aren't going to be like that anymore. So in the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, it starts out with lines from Dante's Inferno. And Dante has encountered these false counselors. And so this is the part in Italian. That's another thing with modernists is they really like being confusing, so they throw in a lot of diverse cultural allusions. There's a line from Dante's Inferno. There are references to English metaphysical poets. It's like Inception. Random Inception joke there. So there's metaphors within metaphors, cultural allusions, lines in completely other languages. I think that one of the amazing things with J. Alfred Prufrock is that you have this whole fragmentation of experience, yet you're going through a journey, and it's a very continuous journey. You're in this person's head, yet it feels very personal. So any poet who can really bridge those gaps, essentially, has done a great job. So it starts out like this. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask what is it. Let us go and make our visit. That's the first stanza, and it continues. 1 stanza, 2 stanzas, 3 stanzas, 4 stanzas. Basically, it's a very epically long poem. It's the last line, or the last stanzas, I should say. I'm going to read it from line 100 something, and it's this one. I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back, when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by seagulls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us, and we drown. The amazing thing about J. Alfred Prufrock is you've gone on this journey, but with those haunting last lines, you really feel like you've just broken the surface, gasping for air. To me, that's the heart of poetry. That's why I read poetry. That's why you should read poetry. It's not about understanding poetry. It can leave you feeling confused. It can leave you feeling hopeless. Books like The House of Mirth, Tale of Two Cities can leave you saying, oh, humanity, or rich people, what the heck are you doing to yourselves? Books like A Tale of Two Cities make you think, wow, I wish I had someone who loved me who would be willing to get guillotined for my sake. Oops, plot twist. Books like these, or poetry like this, really speak to different elements of the human experience, and I feel like reading makes us more human, or at least more understanding of ourselves. Thank you.